Okay, this is the video notes for 1.6b, absolute value equations. This is a continuation of what we did yesterday. Now, or not yesterday, I should say, but last video. So, the difference between 1.6a and 1.6b comes down to what is happening on the outside of the equation. Okay, previously on 1.6a, what you would have seen is a bunch of equations that look like this. They have no numbers on the outside. They're really nice and easy to solve. Whereas on these ones, we're looking at things where we have a 10 on the outside, a -2, a -5, a 6, any of those things. Those are going to impede us, and so we have to impede our ability to get the answer correctly. So what we need to make sure that we understand is this. We need to get rid of everything on the outside of the bracket of our bars here before we can get an answer, before we can put our case. Okay? So hopefully these videos will help with that. What we're really trying, so follow along as best as you can. So the first step that we're going to be talking about is isolating the absolute value on one side of the equation. What we mean by isolating is getting rid of that 10, getting rid of that -2. Those are the things that are going to stop us from getting our answers. The next thing is we need to evaluate whether there's a negative number on the other side after we've done that. And we'll discuss that a little bit more. What you're going to be seeing on number 4, for example, is that's a special case. So I'm going to star this right now, then I'm going to star this one because we're going to come back to it in a second. Okay? Then we write our two equations like we did in 1.6a, and we go from there. So let's work through these problems. Make sure you pause the video if you need to write down anything. I tend to go a little bit fast. Make sure I understand it. And then let me zoom in a little bit here. So if we're on number 1, first thing that we want to do is get rid of this 10. Now the biggest thing that I see when I teach this is that we often forget what this 10 is doing to the bars. What it's doing to the absolute value equation here is because it's touching, it's times. Even though it's not there, it's multiplying. If I kind of zoom out, if you kind of look at the other ones here, you'll notice there are signs in between. There's a -2, there's a plus, there's a -7, there's a -5. Those are going to be your addition and subtraction when we actually deal with those. But for this one, it's 10 times all of this. Okay, so what we want to do first is get rid of multiplication. To undo multiplication, we do the inverse, which is division. Our 10s will cancel, and we end up with the absolute value of -10n equals 10 as our first step. From here, once we have the bars, or these things right here alone, now we can split our case. We can go into two different cases. Okay, our first case is going to be our positive case, and our second case will be our negative case. So we'll have -10n equals 10, and -10n equals -10. We'll be dividing the -10 here, divide the -10 there. We should get n equals -1, and divide both sides by -10. Your -10s cancel, n equals 1. Put your answer inside, -1, 1, because the answer has to be inside the brackets. Okay? As always, make sure to pause the video if you need a little bit more time. Let's move to number 2. So the difference between this is that the 10 was touching the absolute value sign, whereas this -2 has a sign in between. Because it's a -2, what we want to do here is add the 2 first to the other side. Okay, what that'll give us is the absolute value of a over 7 equals -1 plus 2 is 1. From there we can go into our two separate cases. A over 7 equals 1, and a over 7 equals -1. Make sure there's a line there that looks a little bit better. Okay, as always, if you want to get things off the bottom, you need to multiply them. So it's times 7 on both sides. Your 7's cancel. We end up with a equals 7 times by 7 times by 7. 7's cancel. A equals -7. Remember, we need to make sure that our answers are inside our brackets for them to be totally and completely correct. Alright, let's move on to number 3. The first step here is very similar to the one on number 2. We want to add our 5 first to both sides. Okay, we get the absolute value of negative 2 plus n equals negative 5 plus 5 is 0. Now this is a special case. A special case is where we can actually only get one answer here. And the reason is 0 is, there's no negative or positive 0. So I can't really split my cases here. So instead what I want to do is rewrite my equation as a negative 2 plus n equals 0, and I just solve it like a normal equation. I add 2 to both sides, my 2's cancel, I get n equals 2, and that's just my answer right there. If you want to put it inside the brackets, you're good. This is like the lone exception where n equals 2 is actually an acceptable answer. Okay? So, what is the point of that? When we have an absolute value or bars equal to 0, that implies that we only have one number answer. Okay, one answer when that happens. So whenever that happens, we can be positive that we're going to get only one. Moving on to number 6. First step here is you see that the 6 is plus the absolute value. It's a positive 6. There's distance in between, so we need to subtract it instead of dividing it. Okay. What we'll end up with here is the absolute value of 2x plus 5 equals a negative 21. Now this is where we need to be aware of our case. Okay. This, if we remember what absolute values do, they turn things positive, right? But for that to be the case, well, for us to have that be true here, this absolute value would have to give us a positive number out, and we have a negative number. So that kind of leads us to what we have previously where we started before. Is the number on the other side of the equation negative? If you answer yes, then the equation has no solution. So, the benefit of having this is that it's a really quick answer. Because it's a negative answer, it's no solution. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are our other negative numbers? Why didn't we have it here when we had a negative 10? I want you to notice the difference. There are bars here equaling the positive numbers. Our absolute value bars are equal to the positive number. Absolute value bars are equal to 0, which is a negative number. Our absolute value bars here are equal to a negative number. The difference is when you have it. If I ever get to the point where my absolute, before I split and I get a negative number on the other side, it's always going to be no solution. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to number 5. So number 5, we have a 6 on the bottom. If I want to get things off the bottom, I have to multiply. Okay, your 6 cancel, you get the absolute value of a minus 5 equals 24. Positive number, that means we can split it into our two cases, our positive and our negative case. A minus 5 equals 24, and a minus 5 equals a negative 24. Solve your answer. Solve for your answers. Add 5 to both sides. Those cancel. A equals 29. Add 5 to both sides. A equals negative 24 plus 5 is negative 19. And there's your answer. Make sure you put them inside your set brackets. I don't know if I mentioned this last video, but it doesn't matter the order it is. I generally put my negative numbers first, and then my positive numbers second, but it's okay if you have the 29 in front of the negative 19. Both are totally acceptable. Okay. Let's look at number 6. Our first step in number 6, let's see if that's a bit blurry. Yeah, that looks better. Our first step on number 6 is to get the 7 over to the other side. Let's add it. Those go. We get the absolute value of 1 plus 2n equals 7. From that point, we need to separate it into our two cases. Our positive case and our negative case, right? 1 plus 2n equals 7. 1 plus 2n equals negative 7. Subtract your 1 from both sides. 2n equals 6. Divide by 2. N equals 3. Subtract your 1 from both sides. 2n equals negative 8. Divide by 2. N equals negative 4. Put your answers inside. There's your answers. Okay? Hopefully we're doing okay with this. 8 and 9 will be a little bit different, but we'll get to those in a second. Okay? Make sure to pause your video if you need to catch up. So, we're looking at this one. What is the 3 doing? Is it touching the bars? Yes. If there's nothing in between, if you remember from number 1, what do? We have to divide off that 10. Just like we did there, we're going to divide off the negative 3. My negative 3's cancel. That should leave me with the absolute value of negative 4b minus 2 equaling 34. Okay? From there, positive number, we can split it into our 2 cases. We have a negative 4b minus 2 equals 34. And we have a negative 4b minus 2 equals a negative 34. So make that a little bit clearer. Okay, first step, add your 2. 2's cancel, you end up with a negative 4b equals 36. Divide the negative 4. Negative 4's cancel. And that should leave me with b equals a negative 9. Same thing here. Add your 2. Add your 2. Negative 4b equals a negative 32. Divide off the negative 4. The 4's cancel. You're left with b equals 8. As always, make sure your answer goes inside the actual set brackets. Negative 9 and 8 are our answers. Alright, let's move on. So 8's a little bit different, right? In this one, we have to understand which goes first. So for this, in absolute values, what you want to think about is which one is furthest away from the bars. Is 6 or 4 furthest away? Well, 4 is, clearly. So what we want to do is take care of this first, and then we'll come back for the 6. Minus your 4 from both sides. You should get 6, absolute value of negative 3n, plus 6 equals 18. Next, we want to divide off the 6. The 6's cancel. We end up with the absolute value of negative 3n plus 6 equals 3. Our absolute values alone, or equaling a positive number, we can go into our cases now. 3n, or negative 3n, plus 6 equals 3, and negative 3n plus 6 equals negative 3. From there, you want to subtract your 6, solve it like a normal equation. 6's go, negative 3n equals a negative 3. Divide the negative 3's. Your negative 3's cancel, n equals 1. Minus your 6, those go, negative 3n equals negative 9. Divide the negative 3 from both sides, they cancel, n equals 3. Make sure they're inside your brackets, 1, 3. There you go. Okay? Last one, make sure that we understand it at this point. I hope that we can at least try and do this without the notes in this case. So, let's look at the first thing to go. Is the 9 or the negative 4 furthest away? The 9 is. So let's take care of it. The 9's go. We're left with negative 4, absolute value of negative 10n minus 5 equals a negative 20. Next, we want to divide off the negative 4. Those cancel. We're left with the absolute value of negative 10 and minus 5 equaling 5. Give your 2 cases from there. Let me draw a line here so we can kind of tell the difference. Negative 10n minus 5 equals 5, and negative 10n minus 5 equals negative 5. Add your 5's to both sides. Negative 10n equals 10. Divide off the negative 10. N equals a negative 1. Sorry, that is a negative 1. Add the 5, negative 10n equals 0. Add the negative 10, n equals 0. Your answer should be negative 1, comma 0. And there you go. That's how you do it. So what is the key to understanding how to do these? As we're looking at this entire thing, always the first thing that we did was got rid of the outside numbers. Whenever we did, we always got a right answer. We need to make sure that our first process is always to get the bars alone. Okay? All of these ended up alone before we even decided to split our equation. We can't split before then. If we do, we're guaranteed to get it wrong. Okay? Make sure you follow these steps. And if you have any more questions, please refer to the previous video or go back, pause this video, see if you can learn from it. Ask your teachers if you want any more clarification.